What do a lot of fast food packaging and artificial heart valves have in common? Both are coated with PFAS, human-made substances that aren't found in nature. Invented some 80 years ago, they have useful properties.
They're non-flammable, water-repellent, grease-resistant, well-suited for use in lubricants and highly stable.
Which is why industry is putting them into more and more products. And that's worrying because PFAS can make you sick.
They can have an impact on fertility, sperm quality, and fetal development. They can lower immune response to vaccinations. Some are classed as carcinogenic.
So the EU aims to radically curb their use, but industry claims PFAS are indispensable.
Do we want to do without e-mobility or chip production? Do we want to do without 5G technology and fuel cells?
So what do we do? I intend to find out. PFAS stands for per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, covering over 10,000 different chemicals in various forms, solid, liquid, and gas. All PFAS are synthetic organic compounds, or hydrocarbons, in which many or all of the hydrogen atoms are replaced by fluorine atoms. That makes these compounds extremely robust and durable, but at the same time highly persistent, meaning they're virtually impossible to break down. As a result, these forever chemicals accumulate in soil, for example. I've discovered that the ground here in Rastatt, in southwest Germany, where I live, has especially high PFAS levels. We're hunting for PFAS in an oat field, in all directions but with a distinct plan. Just before the harvest, agroecologist Melanie Zoska and her colleague systematically collect grain samples to test them for PFAS in the lab. If these oats are contaminated, what happens then?
Then the farmer can't market them as food.
Just as feed?
Right, but then the testing continues, meaning that the farmer's animal products will then be examined just to ensure that consumers are protected.
How contaminated are oats in general?
They're relatively unproblematic. The grains do absorb PFAS, but not nearly as much as with wheat or soybeans.
Is PFAS becoming less of an issue?
No, it's a constant problem in this area.
It turned out that the oats were okay, but the search for contaminants continues on Eric Rice's farm. He grows strawberries, cereals and asparagus, and he knows what PFAS can do to crops. 2015 was a particularly bad year.
The strawberries were ripe and ready to harvest, and multiple checks were done, just to be on the safe side, also because there's a lot of money at stake. But unfortunately, we couldn't salvage anything and had to destroy 3 hectares worth. That was a tough blow. 70 or 80,000 euros were gone just like that.
How do you deal with that?
We live with PFAS now. I'm the second generation. My father started farming here, and my son wants to continue the tradition. So we have to come to terms with it.
More than half of Eric Rice's 140 hectares are highly contaminated. So no more strawberries, as they absorb a relatively large amount of PFAS, which could mean the end of his farm. How do PFAS enter the environment in the first place, and what impact do they then have? I've come to the Swiss Public Research University, ETH, in Zurich for answers. Professor Martin Scheringer has been studying these compounds for 15 years and has long warned about the inflationary use of PFAS. PFAS are all around us. Why?
For one thing, because they're used a lot, especially in products that are open, meaning they can leach out of these products. And this carbon-fluorine bond is so hard to break that PFAS don't degrade in the environment. So once they've leached out, they're here to stay and can journey onwards via the wind and water.
Mit Wind und Wasser.
Because PFAS are so versatile, they're deployed in a multitude of ways. For example, in firefighting foam, or in everyday objects like furniture, clothes, and plastics. Solid kinds of PFAS, known as fluoropolymers, are used to coat the surface of frying pans. Liquid or soap-like PFAS, called fluorosurfactants, make materials oil and water repellent. And then there are fluorinated or F gases, which serve as coolants in fridges and heat pumps. Just how dangerous are PFAS?
There are different kinds, but most of them are toxic to a certain degree. They damage the liver and kidneys. They can cause testicular cancer. They disrupt lipid metabolism, suppress immune response, and lead to lower sperm counts in men.
How can I find out what contains PFAS?
Unless someone sits down and researches that in patents and industry documents, you won't find out. There's no general registry.
Why not?
Because there's no such requirement. The substances are on the market. Manufacturers might mix them into cosmetic creams or apply them to climbing ropes. And that doesn't even have to be declared.
Recent studies show PFAS are in practically everything. Lithium batteries, oil and gas pipes and tanks, many kinds of paper, and carpeting, dental care products and cosmetics, plus refrigerants and medical implants, to name just a few examples. Confident we'll get to grips with the problem?
No, because it's simply irreversible. You can't get them back out of the environment. It's like once you poured milk in your coffee, you can't get it out again. Except on a much larger scale. It's impossible. The problem has spiraled out of control.
So once PFAS, always PFAS?
Yes. That's the reality.
European soil is full of PFAS. The red dots here show where it's been detected. The blue dots where contamination is suspected. The map is far from comprehensive and with shocking results. Germany alone has 1,500 hotspots, many near chemical plants or airports. And in the case of my home region in southwestern Germany, in fields. Around 1,000 hectares of farmland here are highly contaminated. Why? How did this become a problem region? Michael Reinhardt is a geologist who's an expert at cleaning up PFAS hotspots.
It happened because so-called soil conditioners were applied to the fields. They contained pulp sludge, in particular from laminated paper products. People used it to improve the soil and instead ended up contaminating it.
It's a patchwork of fields contaminated to varying degrees. Farming is only possible to a limited extent. Wells were closed due to high PFAS levels. Clean-up operations are rare. This was once a contaminated field. So it was all dug up and cleaned.
No, they dug down roughly 1 meter. This material was then placed under a building, under a floor slab, and sealed, so that no runoff rainwater can seep through this material.
The water factor. Rain washes the PFAS out of the soil and into the groundwater. This water supplies local wells, but also keeps on flowing, taking the PFAS with it.
The water you can see here is ultimately open groundwater because there's no gravel. And this water then passes from over there, where the embankment is, back into the gravel aquifer and flows on as groundwater.
What does that mean for all of the properties and fields over there?
When this water is taken to irrigate crops, then obviously there'll be a problem.
Swimming is permitted here. The water contains PFAS but is regularly monitored. Two kinds of PFAS are detected most frequently in water here. PFOA, or perfluorooctanoic acid, a remnant from the production of non-stick coatings, and PFOS, or perfluorooctane sulfonic acid, used in firefighting foam. Despite both being pretty much banned for years, they've built up in groundwater over large areas. And it's via this groundwater that the PFAS keep polluting Eric Rice's farm. Every year he uses millions of litres of water to irrigate his crops. But the water from the wells on his farm is so contaminated that he first has to purify it in these silos, using activated carbon filters. How polluted is the water?
It's clean. There are two silos. The first one cleans it, but sometime after we've put in a new carbon filter, we take water samples. And you can see that it's clean. Although at some point, when the carbon's saturated, the PFAS break through. Then we realize it's not working anymore, and that's why the second silo is there, to catch it. It's the emergency silo, so nothing bad can happen.
How often are they changed?
Currently we change one silo per year.
What's a filter like this cost?
7,000 or 8,000 euros.
One filter?
Yes.
Have you ever considered quitting?
Yes. Trouble is, who'd want a farm like this? It's like having a house with a dead body in the cellar. Who'd want to buy it?
So the situation is a precarious one. Yet PFAS continue to find their way into the environment. Why? The consequences are well known, and European Union authorities have reacted by issuing regulations and prohibiting certain types of PFAS. In 2006, they banned PFOS. In 2008, restrictions on foodstuffs. In 2020, a ban on PFOA and limits on 20 sorts of PFAS in drinking water. In 2022, a ban on perfluorohexane sulfonic acid. And in 2023, a stricter drinking water directive. People can't just do what they want, as there are rules on the use of PFAS. Aren't they sufficient?
No. There's a global convention that currently includes 3 kinds of PFAS that are banned worldwide. But that's the tip of the iceberg. If you want to add PFAS to a product, you can do that. We need to get away from these fluorochemicals. And that's just part of a general reorientation in chemical policy too. We need not just an energy transition, but a chemicals transition too. Another way of looking at chemical products and thinking about what we're using them for and in what amounts. We need a serious rethink.
The EU now requires all chemicals to be registered, which involves manufacturers submitting documentation about how safe a substance is. Only those of very high concern are subject to authorisation, although in the case of PFAS, that could soon change. The EU is considering a radical proposal that the production, marketing and use of all PFAS be restricted. The chemical industry is up in arms because, exceptions aside, thousands of existing PFAS could no longer be used in the EU. The proposal is now being evaluated by scientific committees, which will deliver their opinions to the European Commission. How unusual is this? A ban covering not just individual substances, but the whole lot.
Very unusual. A first, in fact. In many cases, PFAS are only mildly toxic, but they're also extremely persistent, which means they can get out of control. They concluded that due to this persistence problem and the gravity of the situation, it's appropriate to group all PFAS together. That's an almost unprecedented step in the EU, and one that the chemical industry believes isn't fair because not all PFAS are the same.
Dordrecht in the Netherlands is home to US company Chemours' largest European production site. In operation for over 60 years, it makes fluoropolymers, a plastic like PFAS. The water and ground around the plant are highly contaminated. Yet Chemours says the chemicals used in its production are safe. We'd like to have posed our questions directly over there, but got answers in writing. And they said, without fluoropolymers, semiconductors, batteries and hydrogen technology made in Europe would no longer be competitive. At our Dutch plant in Dordrecht, we're investing €75 million to reduce PFAS emissions by over 99%. An over-regulation of fluoropolymers would endanger the industrial competitiveness of the EU. So, what do the communities affected have to say? The authorities here in Dordrecht Town Hall are suing Chemours for polluting the environment.
Hi, that's fine. Hi.
Tanja de Jonge is a member of the local council. Does she really think they'll be able to bring this chemical giant to its knees?
Well, when it came here in 1961, I think, well, that was an important move from them for our city.
You sued the company, why?
We think they must have known it when they were here producing. And that's our claim, that we say, well, you have known that the chemicals you use are polluting, or have polluted in those times our area, and are a risk for the health of our citizens.
Due to high levels of PFAS, the council has already shut drinking water wells and advises people not to eat produce grown near the lake or swim in it. And it's now taking Chemours to court.
Is your goal also that this company is no longer located here?
No, that's not our goal. Because our goal is that the use of the chemicals, the forever chemicals, the PFAS, that's our goal, to restrict them and to get rid of it. And if you say, well, just leave our region and they go to another country, they still have the use of these chemicals.
It also takes a lot of courage to do that. Why did you in the end decide to do it anyway?
I think it's also a statement that big companies don't rule everything.
Who will come out on top? Will the court rule that Chemours is liable for the PFAS pollution? Something I'll be finding out soon. Chemours itself was only founded in 2015 as a spin-off from DuPont. The US chemical giant is responsible for one of the worst cases of PFAS contamination worldwide. The shocking story, which has been the subject of several films, played out in the US state of West Virginia. Since the 1950s, DuPont had been making its Teflon coating in Parkersburg using the PFAS compound PFOA. The production waste contaminated the surrounding land and water. Cattle on a neighbouring farm died, and the farmer himself contracted cancer, along with a suspiciously high number of other residents. The resulting legal battle with DuPont went on for almost 20 years. It was revealed that the company had known about PFOA's toxic effects since the 1960s, yet continued to discharge the waste into the environment. In the end, DuPont had to pay around $700 million in compensation to those affected. There, the health of thousands of people is monitored to this day, just like in the region I'm from. While I no longer live in the affected area, maybe I should also have my blood checked. I'll get the test results back in a few days' time. We evidently need to find a way of doing without forever chemicals. I want to meet people who've discovered alternatives, and I know just where. Airfields are often PFAS hotspots, as are chemical and oil industry facilities. Here at the port of Rotterdam, I can see one reason why. When extinguishing major blazes or in training exercises, firefighters deploy huge amounts of foam. This foam used to contain large amounts of PFAS, resulting in the large-scale contamination of entire areas. At this fire academy, firefighters relearn how to extinguish flames with PFAS-free foam. Eike Pelzer is their instructor. As the deputy chief of a factory fire brigade, he used to work a lot with foam that contained PFAS. Today, he trains colleagues to put out big blazes using a new kind of foam. What makes it different?
Unlike the old PFAS-based A3F, this foam does not create an aqueous film of water between the burning material and the foam. Here, it's the layer of foam itself that is active.
You can see this foam is stable, it doesn't fall apart.
Exactly. And it's still covering the combustible material and prevents it from evaporating and possibly reigniting.
And this foam can simply be disposed of normally.
Yes.
And foam with PFAS?
That needs to be incinerated as hazardous waste. I can't just release it into the environment.
Yet that's what happened for decades, on a large scale and with dramatic consequences. Now it's possible to fight even large fires using PFAS-free foam. Still, it'll be a huge task to train all firefighters how to use it and upgrade thousands of facilities.
First, we had to find out how to extinguish fires with fluorine-free foam. Then, what adjustments need to be made to the equipment? How do we need to clean the vehicles and tanks to ensure that the PFAS from the old foam is really gone and isn't now in the new foam?
Did it work right away?
No, it was a long process. With no firms to ask back then, we had to learn how and develop our own system. Now we know it's a major project for every vehicle and fire extinguishing system and requires a huge amount of time and money.
And no time to lose.
Right.
Among the first products where manufacturers tried to replace PFAS was outdoor gear featuring water-repellent materials. How successful were they? I visit Vaude in southern Germany. The company was a pioneer in making PFAS-free sportswear, with other firms following since. The firm's head of development, Bettina Roth, gives me a tour of the plant.
This is water repellent.
Are they always PFAS-free now?
Yes.
The production of new fabrics is a bit more involved. But after generations of development and a lot of trial and error, they're now just as water-resistant and durable as textiles coated with PFAS. The amount of water coming out of this shower is equivalent to heavy rainfall. But I stay nice and dry. PFAS-free outerwear works and is now widely available.
It was a long journey. We had to convince the chemical industry to do something. We had to convince our supply chain to switch to PFAS-free alternatives, which meant changing entire production processes. Back then, there were very few PFAS-free alternatives on the market. The chemical industry simply didn't offer them because the demand wasn't there.
And then?
At some point, Greenpeace launched its detox campaign with a big focus on PFAS, and the outdoor and sportswear industry was publicly taken to task. Then things really picked up speed. There was pressure to change, and so the chemical industry got moving too. And instead of one alternative, suddenly you had many to try out.
But getting there
was tricky.
Clearly, the industry needs a lot of time to come up with alternatives. But who is the PFAS industry exactly? The major manufacturers are based in the US, but produce all over, including in Europe. 3M, known for its adhesives and face masks, is a major producer. Yet 3M plans to quit manufacturing PFAS by the end of 2025. Why?
3M will pay more than $10 billion to settle lawsuits surrounding forever chemicals in drinking water.
The U.S. multinational 3M says it's reached a tentative $10 billion...
Worldwide, 3M is facing hundreds of lawsuits related to PFAS pollution. In 2023 alone, it settled an array of claims in the US by agreeing to pay over $10 billion.
In American history.
Next, I head off to the 3M subsidiary Dyneon, located in Gendorf, Bavaria's largest chemical park. The plant, which 3M plans to close soon, lies on the river Alz. This region has been battling PFAS pollution for years. The fish are contaminated and drinking water has to be filtered. I'm not allowed on the high-security factory grounds, so there'll be no interview with Dyneon. It makes fluoropolymers used to coat components in chemical plants and in the production of microchips. The man I'm meeting here is the chemical park's former director, now spokesman for a lobby group backing this location. But he won't let me onto the grounds either. Instead, he takes me to a meeting room with an aerial photo of the chemical plant.
We're right up there, in that white building.
Where exactly are the PFAS produced?
Dyneon has its operations here on the edge of the factory premises. It's Europe's biggest production facility for fluoropolymers. 40% of the amount produced in all of Europe comes from here. It's not just 3M's largest. It's the biggest plant of its kind in Europe and the most modern in the world. That's why its closure is a problem, not just for workers here, but also for European industry.
That's why you're so attached to this place.
I'm attached to this location with all my heart and soul. That's because for the foreseeable future, our modern industrial society can't do without the fluoropolymers that are produced here. It's not possible for technological reasons. Carbon and fluorine form the strongest bond known in chemistry, and that's why they can't be replaced. For now, but you also can't force other atoms to behave like fluorine. It's a material property. Every gasoline-powered car has a kilo of fluoropolymers in it. An electric version will have 10 kilos. Do we want to do without e-mobility? Do we want to do without chip production or 5G technology? Fuel cells, hydrogen electrolysis, they all involve fluoropolymer membranes.
No PFAS equals no energy transition and no future technologies. For the Chem Delta spokesman, there seems to be no doubt. His group even expects the market for PFAS to grow and is lobbying for production to continue at Gendorf. The industry being against radical restrictions isn't all that surprising. But business interests aside, do they have a point? I travel to Freiburg to visit a small startup called Ionesis, which is investigating new ways of making fuel cells. To date, fuel cells have all required parts that contain PFAS, like many other hydrogen technologies.
Hello. Hi. Schön, dass du da bist. Ich freue mich. Moin. Was im Büro?
The 15-strong team at Ionesis is trying to change that. Before CFO Lisa Langer tells us how far they've come, this is how fuel cells work. Fuel cells transform chemical energy from, say, hydrogen into electric power without combustion. Power used to propel trucks, for example. Hydrogen protons pass through a membrane only permeable to positively charged particles. The electrons travel through an external circuit, producing electricity. As each cell generates just 1 volt, they're combined into stacks, often comprising hundreds of fuel cells. The heart of every cell is its proton exchange membrane, which has to be chemically stable, durable, and easy to make. Which parts of the fuel cell contain PFAS?
The membrane in the electrode is made of perfluorosulfonic acid, which belongs to the PFAS family. Perfluorosulfonic acid has a high proton conductivity and permeability. That's why PFAS is a popular option right now, as it performs best under the requirements. It conducts protons and is sufficiently stable.
That's what needs replacing.
Right.
And does it work?
It works to a certain extent. We've already proven its performance in a full-format cell, which could then actually be built into the stack. But the technology isn't market-ready yet.
When do you expect it to be?
We're aiming to have something market-ready by the end of the year after next. Then, of course, we still have to produce it at scale. But ours aren't the only components in the fuel cell stack that use PFAS. The manufacturers of the gas diffusion layers and the sealants also need to follow suit.
So PFAS are a necessity in hydrogen technology right now, though not going forward.
Right. Today we still need PFAS so as not to nip the burgeoning hydrogen economy in the bud. But it's very important these substances be banned to ensure that over time, green hydrogen technologies really are green and that everyone in the industry works together to develop these alternatives.
Yet many in the industry are still vehemently fighting change and continue to bank on PFAS. We get some news from Dordrecht. A verdict has been reached in the trial against Chemours. The local authority won. The judge ruled that Chemours acted illegally and was responsible for the pollution. So the relevant communities have a right to compensation, while they continue to fight for PFAS to be banned worldwide. Chemours responded that it is willing to discuss concrete measures, but not to stop producing PFAS altogether. Back to Zurich. Are we really dependent on PFAS?
No. These companies all know that they should be searching for alternatives. In many areas, they've already started. Having to find alternatives triggers a great upsurge in innovation.
Today, the biggest proportion of PFAS go into air conditioners, cooling systems, and heat pumps in the form of fluorinated or F gases, which are used as refrigerants. More heat pumps will be needed as we transition to greener sources of energy. Here at the Fraunhofer Institute in Freiburg, Lena Schnabel is conducting research into the heat pumps of tomorrow. Instead of F gases, they will operate using natural refrigerants, like propane. Some manufacturers are already producing these propane heat pumps.
Natural refrigerants are found in nature, so they're easily tolerated. And that's an exciting aspect when it comes to looking for alternatives.
And how well do they work?
Propane is a tried and true refrigerant, and it works just as well as existing refrigerants. As for the higher temperatures involved in the renovation of older buildings, it's sometimes even better than the usual refrigerants.
The engineer shows me the inner workings of a heat pump, a tangle of pipes and cables, though it seems rather small when you consider that a device like this is meant to heat an entire house. And where does the refrigerant flow here?
This is the compressor. It's the component that pumps it around.
If natural propane works just as well and has been in use for decades, I wonder, why did industries replace it with PFAS gas in the first place?
Propane is flammable. That's the big issue.
But you wouldn't have a problem with having a propane heat pump at home?
I wouldn't, because I have a feeling for what the companies really put into it. And one measure is to see how much refrigerant you really need, how much you can reduce the amount to also lower the safety risk.
With heat pumps, then, the synthetic refrigerants containing PFAS can easily be replaced. But for as long as they can, industries will keep using F-gases and other PFAS chemicals, simply because they're so practical. But their continued production means that PFAS will also keep accumulating in the ground, in rain, and also in our bodies. I have an appointment with a toxicologist from Germany's Environmental Protection Agency to see how contaminated my blood is.
I have your test results, and as expected, we could find perfluorinated chemicals in your blood and serum. We found a little more PFOA than PFAS, which is vexing, because PFOA is a substance that already has an effect at low concentrations. And your contamination is so high that we can't rule out with any certainty that it won't affect your health.
And that means what?
That you're in relatively good company. To date, we haven't found a single person, children, teenagers, or adults, where these substances weren't present.
How did they get in my body?
Likely through food and drink. Frequent consumption of eggs, fish, seafood, or organ meats.
I haven't eaten meat for 30 years.
Oh, of course, that's good. But also disconcerting.
So where's it all from?
It's ubiquitous, everywhere in the environment. Personally, I find it annoying that we spend so much time discussing whether to take countermeasures against forever chemicals.
So you're in favor of a ban?
Absolutely. The data on the contamination of children and young people in Germany and young people and adults throughout Europe shows that our population is too highly contaminated for us to be able to safely rule out effects on and dangers to our health.
Thank you. And what can I do about it? Nothing. Ultimately, we need laws to prevent more contamination. Can the EU's PFAS restriction proposal achieve that? Industries have been fighting it for months, their main argument being that PFAS are indispensable. A notion that many researchers disagree with.
There are certainly individual products where PFAS are very important, which we call essential. Artificial heart valves or pumps and tubes out of Teflon, for example, or fluoropolymers for dialysis machines, where it's vital the blood doesn't clump or stick. Those are applications where PFAS are extremely effective, and we'll continue to need them. But that's just a small fraction of the many, many uses at present. And limiting use to these few vital applications would largely solve the problem.
The arguments are now being assessed by the European Chemicals Agency. Who will prevail? That will ultimately be decided by the European Commission, the governments of EU member states and the European Parliament in 2 or 3 years' time. But we still have no answer as to what can be done about the huge amounts of PFAS that are already in the environment. Getting rid of them is like trying to extract the milk back out of your coffee. But despite the difficulties, one attempt is underway at a NATO airfield near Germany's North Sea coast. It might look like a giant sandbox here, but it's anything but a playground. This is all contaminated earth.
Yes.
How many tons in total?
We assume we'll need to wash 700 to 800,000 tons of earth to get the PFAS out of it.
Washing earth sounds like a crazy idea. The tower involved is huge and loud.
Here the soil is sprinkled with clean water to rinse away the larger elements.
It's a simple enough setup. Sieve, rinse, shake, and keep repeating until the PFAS are released into the water.
Here you can see the PFAS. During the washing process, the firefighting foam that's soaked into the contaminated ground starts foaming again.
The brown stuff on top.
Right. This is the part of the facility where the contaminated wash water is rinsed out of the soil.
The PFAS are later filtered out of the water and incinerated or disposed of properly. What's left behind is cleansed, sandy soil that can once again be used as a construction material. The clean-up takes a huge amount of effort and funding. Can this only be done here, or could this be applied to other clean-up sites?
The earth has to be washable. Clay-like soil that clumps isn't suitable for washing because of the residual fine material that can harbour contaminants.
So for many places in Germany, at least, washing the ground isn't a feasible solution, not to mention the gargantuan effort involved. How long will you do this?
We plan to operate for 10 years, but the cost is extremely high. We're always a step behind the chemical industry or the chemicals. Tomorrow we might be dealing with other contaminants that harm the environment, ones that we don't know yet.
It's a Sisyphean task, but there's still a chance to stop these chemicals from plaguing us forever. Getting rid of PFAS, whether in contaminated sites or production processes, will be extremely complex and costly. And we might not succeed straight away, but we'll pay an even higher price if we don't even try.